Good morning, team. It is Tuesday, March 19th. I'm Amy Corr. Here I am with Kevin Van Neck. We both survived St. Patrick's Day. We hope you did too. We've got a great topic for you today. You're going to love it. Trust us. Yes, you will.
Yes, you'll love it.
We're going to talk a little bit about practice makes perfect. That's right. Practicing so that when you are on the spot, you are perfect. So on that note, fill up your coffee, make it hot. Let's jump into the next episode of Coffee with Amy and Kevin.
That's right. Good morning. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about something that you don't like, probably. We said you were going to love the topic.
We're teeing this up really nicely.
But we're really
right
going to sell it to you by saying you're not going to love what we're about to say. But it's role-playing, right? So here's the thing about practice, and you and I have talked about it so many times, which is, you have to practice to become good at an instrument, right? Piano, violin, whatever. You have to practice to become great at a sport.
Yep. To
really compete at the highest level. And in real estate, it's the same concept, because
Sure.
you have to perform at a high level. The only way you could do that is by practice,
right.
And your practice directly correlates to the success and income and all of that in your business. Yep. So role playing is the best way to practice, really the only way, because so much of real estate is conversation. It's
Yes.
conversation with your colleagues, it's conversation with prospects, with your clients, past clients, etc. So we're going to suggest to you today that you really take some time to focus on role playing. And role-playing with multiple different people, consumers, with friends, family, colleagues, all of them. But what we are going to really highlight is that the worst time, and this isn't our line, right? This is a line from Phil M. Jones,
Yep.
who you might know from Exactly What to Say, the author. And what he says is the worst time to practice what you're going to say, or the worst time to figure out what you're going to say, is right when you're going to say it.
Yep.
So it's a key to practice, because if you don't, who knows what's coming out of your mouth?
Yeah. And, we've talked to a lot of our agents about scripting, right? That's what we call it, role play, practicing your script. And I always laugh and say to agents, when you think about people rehearsing lines, think about people who make a ton of money for practicing scripts. Look at Julia Roberts, George Clooney, just to name a few, right? And I say that in, kind of a joking way, but the reality is they do. They practice what they're going to say over and over again, so that when the time comes and it is action, they can deliver the lines perfectly, but they also can be in the moment. And I think as agents, that's what we need to remember, because sometimes we're so busy trying to figure out, what am I going to say next? We're not even listening to the client, right? So I love this idea of practicing, finding somebody that is a friend in the office, just get uncomfortable together. Just go ahead and practice. Because the nice thing is if you do it when real time happens, when it's game time, you're going to be a lot better suited and ready to go to be successful.
100%. And I think that's why, if you don't practice both with a colleague in the office, right, or a potential consumer, and that could be your family or friends who aren't in real estate, you're going to get their reaction and input.
Right.
And I think also with a great thing, it's going to start with laughs. Like, you're going to joke around at the beginning of role playing because it sounds funny, but then you're going to get serious with it.
Yep.
And then you're going to be able to give each other serious feedback on how it sounds and ways to improve, because there's nothing more important than being able to say the right thing at the right time, because you could blow it very easily. You say the wrong thing, or it comes off inauthentically, or you don't know the script. At that point, it becomes a script. Whoever you're talking with knows that you're just reading them lines, and it's not truly something that is impactful. So let's start with the first. What are we going to practice?
So I would say first thing really is our presentations. Let's think about it. We've got some basic ones when I'm going on a listing presentation, when I'm going to be talking with a potential seller, right? We've got an entire process for that. And a lot of it is we can plan ahead of time exactly what we're going to say, right? Making sure that we're on point. And again, I think when we practice this too, you can figure out with a listing presentation, we know that there's different types of clients, right? We know some that might be really data driven, some that are way more emotional. So the nice thing is when we're practicing these presentations, we can interpret or plan for some of those nuances, right? And see how that would play out. So to your point, it doesn't sound like a script when the time comes. So it's your listing presentation. Also, when we're sitting down with buyers, we obviously really encourage agents to sit down before you get a buyer in the car, right? And do a consult and sit down and take them through all the things that you're going to be able to do to create success for them. So practice that ahead of time, right? So those are just two, but those are two of the main ones, right? Buyers and sellers. Let's make sure we knock that out of the park.
Those are the clients. Those are the clients you work with. So yes. And if you don't knock it out of the park, it's not, yes. So let's go to number 2. What else do we practice? I think we have so much physical collateral, right? So whether it's brochures or the list, like a physical listing presentation, digital listing presentation, custom market reports, all of these different pieces of collateral that we have. And a lot of times what happens if we're not prepared to speak to them or someone asks us a question, this happens a lot, right? In the listing.
On page 45, what does this mean?
Yes, they ask you to explain what this affiliation means or what this means. And you can't say it. You don't know it. If you can't speak to it in an intelligent way, we end up reading from it and using sentences, and it just comes off like we're not knowledgeable about how that creates success for them. So understanding the collateral, how to present it, and practicing it, the market report as well.
Yes.
A lot of times, if you're delivering a market report to them, yes, you're giving them the report, but you need to give them some commentary on your thoughts or interpretation of it. And if you're not prepared, you end up making things up, twisting numbers, realizing you said something incorrect. And the worst is when they point out, but this says this.
This doesn't
if you
seem
didn't
to
say
be
the right
right.
thing.
Yeah.
So practicing all of that is really, really important as well.
And there's a lot of great collateral. There's a lot. And I think sometimes, I'll be honest, I think sometimes agents don't use all of the collateral because they don't prep and they don't read through it. So it's almost like, you know what, I don't know what's in here, so I'm not going to necessarily drop it off or give it to a client. But, everything that, has been created by your brokerage, us here at Properties, Christie's International Real Estate, we've made sure that like what we put together is going to be really effective for our agents. But you got to know it in order to properly use it. So I love that.
Just practice that delivery.
Yeah. And then I think once you know the presentations that you have to focus on and using the collateral, I think another piece in my mind that is something agents need to practice, we actually have a class for it, Getting What You're Worth, but is really honing in on your value proposition as an agent. You've got to, you can say I'm competing against all of these other people. I think the person you are competing against the most is you. And when you are unprepared and you can't really understand like what makes you different and special as an agent and what you're bringing your clients, then, it can't translate to somebody that you're talking to. So figuring out your value proposition. And, in our class, we talk about honing in on the big 3. What are the 3 things that, move the needle when working with your clients? But it's not just maybe knowing it, but saying it out loud. There's something about saying it a few times. So to your point, it doesn't sound rehearsed. It comes off really naturally.
Right. And I think so it's not confusing. What do we have a tendency to do? Overtalk. So I think the idea is once you've talked to a certain point and really said nothing, people stop listening.
Totally. I've never done that. Ever. I've never overtalked.
Me neither, don't worry. But I think it's really important. The practice helps you make it concise. Right? So I think the other part, the last piece, pricing. We talked about it last week, right?
Yeah, storytelling.
Yes. Yeah. Specific to pricing, what is the dialogue you're using in telling those stories? And I think over-talking happens here too, because you know the value of the property. You have an idea in your mind of what the value and what the market says the value is. You know that you have to convince the seller to follow your lead, right? So we tend to over-talk and we tend to say too much and we just start blabbering on about trends or things that the seller maybe isn't even interested in.
Right.
And then we create confusion. So when there's confusion, there's no decision making.
Right.
That's when you get we need to think about it. So if you practice your pricing discussion and your conversation, you practice how you're going to deliver those stories.
Right.
And you have this script that you end up throwing away because you know how that conversation is going to flow. It's going to be much more convincing to that seller to understand why you're presenting the data you are, to follow your lead in pricing.
And what I love about that is that when you practice this information, pricing and storytelling, then you also can more powerfully stop talking and be okay with the silence because you know what you've articulated makes sense. And now it's time to zip it. So on that note, I think I'm going to zip it.
Yeah, me too.
We hope you got some great ideas as it relates to role play. I know it's painful, but I promise if you practice, you are going to be perfect out there in this market.
It's worth it.
It's worth the pain.
Spend the time doing it.
That's right. So on that note, make it a great Tuesday. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. But until then, remember, you got this.
Oh, no. Take it on you?
No, all good.
Okay.